I'm sorry. Now, we were going to do this another of the summer series tonight. Evidently, there was some sort of issue at the Rain residence, and he was supposed to teach this evening, and he had to leave, so, well, there went that. We'll just leave that there. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just leave it like that. I'll tug it up a little higher. There we go. And so he was going to speak on submission tonight. I'm not going to be doing that. One of the reasons is I don't know anything about it. And the other reason is I'm completely unprepared. I do have his notes, but I can't read his writing, and we'll just let him do that next week. So where we will be studying is going to be in Mark chapter 3. So lucky enough for me, I'm teaching Mark 3 on Sunday mornings with the help of our brother Keith, and it just happened to be my turn. And since I've been off work, I got an early start on studying, and so I had at least an idea of what was going to be going on Sunday morning, and so we're just going to do it tonight instead. And so if you want to turn to Mark chapter 3, we're going to start in verse 7, and we're going to try to get through 35. We'll see. And then Sunday morning, all those that missed it tonight are just going to miss it, because we'll just start from where we finish up tonight and try to make it easier on me. It always always rolls back to me. So, and we've been going through Mark, and we're reading about the conflict between Jesus and the religious authorities and the kingdom that Jesus is establishing, and the threat to the scribes and the Pharisees hurt their feelings and all that. But last week we talked about the leaders are not following Jesus, but they continue to challenge Jesus. And so in Mark 3:6, they're talking about how the Pharisees, they're also working together with the Herodians to figure out how to destroy Jesus. So now they're getting serious. So we have this situation where the leaders aren't following Jesus. The people that follow the leaders, see that the leaders aren't following Jesus. They're conspiring with others to stop Jesus to the point of destroying him. So who's following Jesus?
I don't remember who the Herodians are.
It's just a group, a religious group that had a lot of pull at the time.
Not like the Sadducees.
No, I mean, not unlike, but they weren't the Sadducees.
Most of them were, are they on the Sanhedrin?
Right. Anyway, conspiring to do damage to Jesus. So if the religious leaders are challenging Jesus and now they've rejected him, who's going to follow him? So Mark's going to tell us. So it sounds like a difficult thing if you just put yourself in the place of the people, but so when Mark says that the religious leaders are conspiring to destroy Jesus, we still have a great crowd following Jesus, okay? And that's not only from Galilee. We've got from Galilee and Judea and even beyond the Jordan, Tyre and Sidon and a lot of places. So you can see where the division is starting. We got fixing to have some problems because if you look at it from the religious leader's point of view, he's stealing their flock, okay, and corrupting their. We're going to call it religion, and so. But we're also reading about the beginnings of the fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy that the Messiah would come to be a light for the Gentiles also. So nations are coming to Jesus. Outsiders are coming to Jesus. He's getting more famous, and so much so that the crowd is just crushing at this point. It's getting to the point where him and his disciples can't even eat without people just crushing in with, we talked about, letting down down through the roof and all that. But whenever an unclean spirit saw Jesus, they bowed and confessed that Jesus is the Son of God. So we talked some about the authority of Jesus last week, and so it's very prevalent. I mean, it's the authority of Jesus is a powerful thing. The crowds are seeing the authority, and they're coming to him. He's teaching on the Sabbath. And through all this, the religious leaders are opposed. They don't see his authority, okay? And so, as Jesus, we're all the way to chapter 3:13 now, but this is when he's calling his apostles. But the crush of the crowds, the nonsense from the religious leaders, and all the, you get the questions, you get just the stuff, all the stuff that's going on in Jesus' life at this point. Jesus goes up on the mountain, and he calls those whom he desires, and they came to him, and he appointed 12 apostles, okay? This is, some commentators say this would be considered the formation of the new Israel, okay? So we know in Exodus, Moses goes up on the mountain. He receives the law from God. That begins the formation of Israel, God's people. But now we're reading the rejection of Jesus by Israel's leaders. So it's time for new leadership. New leadership in this new nation, this new Israel. And so Jesus goes up on the mountain like Moses, and he's forming a new Israel. He's calling on those whom he desired, and they came to him. He appoints 12, and that kind of fleshes out the imagery of the old law. And so, because you ask yourself, and we know the imagery involved, but we ask yourself, why not 10? Why not 10 people? It's all new. Why not 13? The imagery is just as clear as the 12 sons of Israel became a nation of Israel. So through these 12, that's loud, will come the new nation of Israel. So, and that becomes clear when the 12 are sent out later to preach. They have authority over unclean spirits, so they were given authority, something that's recognizable to those that don't know them or who they're preaching to. They have this power and spirit that sets them apart from which would have been other prophets or religious people or of the era. They have something new, they have something strong, and they have the authority of Jesus, and so it's something that's recognizable. So, so they become, they will become the leaders of the new nation of Israel. So this is talked about in verse 14, and the restoration of Israel is coming. So Jesus is the servant who has come for covenant renewal and restoration of Israel, and that's talked about in Isaiah 49. So Jesus is God forming the new Israel as his covenant people. So these 12 are given kingdom authority, and those who submit to the authority of the apostles are submitting to Jesus and entering the kingdom. So there's a lot going on just in these first few verses as we see the change in the dynamic of what was Israel's existence, Israel's leaders, Israel's practices and cultures and all the things that make Israel Israel. And now it's a drastic change has started. We see that obviously the religious leaders recognize it, but we also see that the people recognize it. And so the crowds are crushing crowds are, his apostles can't even eat. But then we see Jesus, with all of this going on, then his family shows up, okay? Now, we all know family can be an issue, and we'll just say that kindly. Family can be an issue. Now, if you have family that doesn't agree with your choices as far as your religious beliefs, as far as your moral standing, as far as who you are and what you do, obviously there's conflict. It's obvious that there's conflict. I'm sure anyone in this room that's had that issue understands that there's a conflict because that's just human nature. So we see Jesus' family show up, and without reading the whole story, you ask yourself, are they coming to follow Jesus? These are people that have known Jesus before. These are people that have known Jesus his lifetime. Okay.
They didn't come to join him. They come
No.
to believe him. Because they said
Yeah.
he died his mind.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, no, they didn't come to follow Jesus. They've come to seize Jesus because they think he's crazy. They think he's out of his mind. Okay? Which, if you stand back and look at what's going on from the perspective of the family, you can see that that's a possible answer to the situation that's going on. If you had a loved one, a brother or whatever that you thought was having a breakdown, or you thought was crazy, or you thought was, at this time, possessed, or any of those things, you'd want to help them, right? I mean, that's just what we do. So.
That just means that Mary and Joseph didn't really understand all that went on.
And all the brothers didn't understand, the sisters didn't understand. So he had brothers and sisters. We're told in John that Jesus' brothers didn't believe in him. So they come to get him because they think he's crazy. And so, we talk about, our family might think we're crazy for following Jesus. So we can see from the scriptures that we're not alone, okay? If a family member of yours thinks you're crazy for your submission to Christ, you're not alone, because Jesus' family thought he was crazy. So Jesus understands what we're going through. Okay. But they're not the only ones that think Jesus is crazy. Okay. The scribes declare that Jesus is possessed by Beelzebub and casts out demons by the prince of demons. Jesus' family thinks he's crazy. The teachers of the law think he's possessed. But in all of that, in all of those things that are going on, all this muddled up stuff, not one time do they ever deny the miracles. No one denied that the miracles are being done. No one denied that the unclean spirits are being cast out. No one denies that people are being healed. But the unbelief of the scribes just proves a point that miracles do not create faith. I want us to think about that a minute, because we always think that, if someone could do miracles, you would have faith. But nowhere in the scriptures does the miracles create faith. Now, we have a lot of instances where faith is answered with miracles, okay? But it doesn't create faith. The unbelief of the scribes, faith is never the result of miracles. Faith is not born from apologetics or proofs. And if we only, and we like to think about this because we have hindsight 2020, It's a mistaken view to think that if we only saw the undisputed miracles of Jesus, that people would believe and believe more. Okay? We can see right here from the scriptures, that's not the case. Okay? I like to think that it would empower my faith, okay, if I saw something like that, or if I was a recipient of something like that. I like to think that obviously that would be a boost in the well of my faith that nothing else I don't think could give me. But we find in the scriptures that's not necessarily the case. So mountains of proof and miracles are not going to change the mind of these religious leaders. No matter what Jesus does, these leaders are not going to believe. Okay? Now we understand they believe the miracles are being performed. They believe the healings are being performed. They believe, but they don't believe that Jesus is anything other than Satan and Satan's road into humankind. Okay? They say that Jesus has the power from Satan. That's how much they don't believe. It's not that they don't believe, they refuse to believe. Okay. So Jesus talks about how can Satan cast out Satan? A kingdom can't stand, a house can't stand if it attacks itself. Satan would be destroying himself, and it's just common sense. So why would he do that? It's illogical. It's an illogical conclusion. It's just, we like to say they're just grasping at straws. They're just trying to do anything they can to just hang on as long as they can. And Jesus talks about it. He clarifies it. He says Jesus, and what he's doing is not the power of Satan used against Satan. So Jesus has entered the strong man's house and is plundering his goods because he's bound the strong man, at verse 27. Okay? Jesus has invaded Satan's realm, and he can take anything he wants. Jesus can do with Satan's rule and authority what he wills because he has bound Satan. So Jesus has authority and rule over Satan. Jesus has come for a critical victory against Satan that sets us free from our chains of sin. Okay? The authority that Jesus possesses is used to bind Satan and set us free. And the religious leaders, they just miss it. They just are blinded by whatever the reasons may be. They're blinded to the fact of who Jesus is. And so
Well, they don't believe because they don't want to believe.
and that's the case, and regardless of how many miracles and stuff has been done, they're just not going to believe. And so how can casting out unclean spirits be by the power of Satan? Casting out unclean spirits sets people free who are imprisoned by that unclean spirit. So this is kind of representative of what Jesus is doing. He's setting people free. He's healing people. He's rescuing people. He's restoring people. He's reconciling people to the Father, and that's one of the most important points. Because he talks about, in verse 28, all sins will be forgiven the children of man, and whatever blasphemies they utter. People will be forgiven for all their sins and all their slander. And that's praiseworthy. That's a wonderful news. We all need that. God reigns, and that's the good news. Satan is bound, and people's sin are forgiven. That's how it's going. But now, in 29 and 30, Jesus says something that can be polarizing one way or the other. And I don't know why, but there is an eternal sin that cannot be forgiven. And people get upset when we talk about that. Everybody wonders what it is, and the text that we're talking about and in verse 30 tells us exactly what it is. People were saying that Jesus has an unclean spirit. What does that mean, and why can't that be forgiven? When I was a young Christian, I asked this question of the preacher at the time that was instrumental in me being baptized, and he said that basically the cliff notes, and that's the way I like it. I like the easy. The cliff notes is anything that you attribute to God that is Satan, that's blasphemy. Anything you attribute to Satan that is God, that's blasphemy. And that's as easy as I can say it. So the sin cannot be forgiven because they're attributing the work of God as evil and belongs to Satan. Okay, and this is the other half of that. They refuse to recognize Jesus' authority, Jesus' power, and Jesus' rule. So they'll never repent because every piece of evidence blinds them from seeing the truth even more. Okay, so the writer has this illustration I thought was fairly interesting, and you can apply it to just whatever, whenever way you want. But if you believe that your surgeon is a murderer, you won't submit to an operation by him. Okay, there's just no. If you believe your surgeon is a murderer, there's no way you're going to let him perform surgery on you. Okay. If you see Jesus is from Satan, you're never going to submit to his will. So, with all of that being said, we got to remember and we got to realize, and we find in the Scriptures that there's not anything recorded, there's no record in Scripture of anyone genuinely asking for forgiveness from God and being denied. Okay? Let's remember that. No one that has asked forgiveness from God has been denied, according, from the record we have in the Scriptures. Okay? And Jesus says all sins and their slanderous words will be forgiven. Okay? That's what it says. All sins, and I wish it said can be. Okay? Because all sins can be forgiven. The only way that it can't happen is without a faith in Jesus. If you can't submit yourself to Jesus, if you can't acknowledge Jesus as who he is and what he is, if you deny who Jesus is, it'll never happen. And so when we get to the end of the verse, 31, the mothers and brothers, Jesus' mother and his brothers are trying to get Jesus to come with them. So it's probably his brothers and his sisters, but they're calling for Jesus to leave and come with them. But what does he do? And this is a controversial question and something that is a difficult thing for a family to understand. But Jesus says, "Who are my mother and who are my brothers?" And then looking around at all those that sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and brothers. For whosoever does the will of God, he is my brother and sister and mother." Okay, that's just another proof that we're family. Okay, God's children are God's family, and we being God's children are God's family. We're brothers and sisters in Christ. And so in the family-oriented culture in the East at that time, where loyalty to one's family was among the highest of values. It wasn't just something that, you know, you didn't let somebody say something bad about your mama. You know, this was a huge cultural thing.
But he told him a long time ago he was there to be about his father.
Got to be about his father's business. And he's not rejecting his family, okay? He's just establishing a new family, okay?
He's distinguishing between the physical family and spiritual family. And physical family was important to him. He makes that clear in his teachings.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But just as, or maybe more important, is your spiritual family.
Sure, and what a difficult teaching that is in this, even in our culture, but in this culture, it'd be a difficult teaching because they weren't even, you know, they couldn't. They had trouble even with the concept of neighbor. Okay, so who is my neighbor? Okay, I want to do as little as I can get away with. I want to do as minimum of any kind of work that I have to do. I don't want to love as many people as I have to. Just as few people as I can love is easier for me, so that's better. So
That was the old law, is a minimal
that's exactly right.
standard here.
Yeah, and so if I can just, you know, if I get to decide who my neighbor is, if I get to decide who my family is, if I get to decide who I'm either beholding to or that kind of thing, it makes it way easier for me. And this is just blown out now. It's just blown out. So he's not rejecting his family. He's just establishing this new family that we saw in verse 13 as they're being called to create this new Israel. So he's establishing a new society in which family is not defined by ethnic or national identity, but defined by a common allegiance to the kingdom of God. He didn't allow his, we're going to call it earthly, physical family to take priority over the new family, over the 12. And like I said, he wasn't rejecting his earthly family. He was just, there was an example being set where the priorities would lie in this new time. So Jesus came to heal. He came to set people free. The leaders of Israel rejected Jesus and are trying to destroy him. But he establishes this new Israel with the 12 apostles and establishes a new family, binds Satan. He's come and conquered Satan so that all sins people commit will be forgiven. So who are the ones who follow Jesus? Who are the ones who belong to him? Who are the ones who enjoy that forgiveness? Who are the ones who are part of the family of Jesus? People who reject Jesus and don't submit don't get to enjoy the blessings that Jesus offers. Okay? Those who listen to Jesus and do his will are the ones who belong to the family. So it's these that Jesus says, you are my brothers and sisters. So we can belong to the family of Jesus and not separate ourselves from our family on earth. If your family is also part of your spiritual family, it makes that so much easier. Okay? Makes that so much more of a blessing that you can be uplifted and supported and encouraged. But within our physical family, I think it's important that we don't shake the dust off our feet because a lot of, I say a lot of times, I don't know, sometimes it's an ongoing thing, but even with friends that you haven't seen in a while, you know, friends remember you for who you were. Okay, that's just generally the way it is. Say from high school or college, those friends remember you for who you were, okay, not who you are. Okay? Your family remembers you for who you were. All the trouble that you got in, they remember that. All the trouble that you got them in, they remember that, okay? And so when you put on Christ and you become part of this new family, and they don't have an understanding of it, it can be difficult, okay? And we can't let difficult stand in our way of expressing Jesus to our earthly family. We can't let difficult stand in our way of expressing Jesus to the world, okay, which we like to do. We like to make excuses and that kind of thing. So, understanding the authority of Jesus carries with it doing the will of God. That's why early in Mark, when we see the men just immediately drop what they're doing and follow Jesus when he says, "Follow me." So when we look at what happens when we see Jesus and we submit to him, verse 28 says the sins are forgiven. We're set free from Satan. Okay? And a lot of times, something that can hinder us from the gospel, hinder us from becoming part of the family, is we think we've sinned too much. Okay, we've done too much. There's no way, and we can find examples with Paul that he was he labeled himself or considered himself the chief of sinners, and that's a huge thing. But we also see the zeal with which Paul embraced Christ and his will and his kingdom. And so there's not anything along those lines that keeps us from Jesus, that sets us free from Satan and allows us to be forgiven. So we're to be the new family that Jesus built. He tells us how to look at one another in Christ. We're family. We're to act like family. And when I say act like family, we all have a different definition of family, but we need to act like a loving family. We need to act like the Cleavers. You know what I mean? That's a different. Some people in here may not know what the Cleavers even is, but leave it to Beaver. Just watch it on Netflix or something. You'll understand what I'm talking about. But anyway, the family dynamic that comes from loving one another is encouraging. It's uplifting. It's the sadness that comes with being in a family, the challenges that come with being in a family that we can all overcome because we're family. We have to have a connection with one another. When we think of each other, okay, I just don't think Mike or Dale or Alonzo or Donnie. I think Brother Mike, Brother Dale, Brother Alonzo, Brother Donnie. It's a different way of thinking of each other than just somebody that we work with or somebody that we're acquainted with. So it has to be this family and this connection has to be so great or strong or evident that our physical family thinks we're crazy. Okay? Go ahead, Brian. Brother Brian.
Your family that you actually physically live with, they know all your faults, all your weaknesses. They know you're not really a saint, so they might look at you a little bit.
Yeah, and that's true. And so,
Well, Jesus did not surround himself with perfect people.
and that's true too. Ever, you never found that. He came to heal the sick. Okay, and so our responsibility is my responsibility as Brian's brother is to remember my imperfections, is to remember my issues. Okay, not to project that on Brian or judge Brian for anything like that. That's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to know where I've come from, where I am, and to know I have people that love me, that have been there and been here, and we've made it this far. And so
there are no perfect people, because if there were, there would be no reason for Jesus to.
that's exactly right. Jared said there is no perfect people. Now, some of us are a little closer than others. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, yeah. If you don't believe me, just ask my wife.
The Jews might have received this. They're the ones that were chosen. Hey, we're the family of Abraham.
Right.
And that's why they asked. They said, why is the apostles, why is your teacher eating with tax collectors and sinners?
Right. And it feels.
The very people that Jesus called my brothers and sisters.
Yeah. And the problem is, being from their history separate from the rest of the world, supposed to be separate. There was a lot of issues with the scribes and the Pharisees in that area. But now that family, Israel, it looks to them like they're now being separated. Okay, so you have this people that feel like they're being split apart. Okay, and they are, and it gets even worse when the Gentiles start being accepted. Is that too? Man, I made it to the second belt. Can you imagine that? That hadn't happened in a long time. So, yeah. So anyhow, as all of that turmoil is going on, we got to remember as we're going through Mark, this is just the beginning, and so it's not going to get much better from here on out. But we get this framework and this groundwork and this foundation to see where the church is coming from in all of its steps, and we get a lot of the whys. Why is it like that? Why did these things have to happen in the way they happened in order for us to get to where we are today? And so that we find out a lot in Mark. So if you're going to be in class Sunday morning, we'll be in Mark 4, verse 1. So I appreciate your indulgence and putting up with me tonight. I know it wasn't what you came to hear, but I do appreciate it, and thank you very much.